You came to the right place. Data doesn't lie. The science behind the art of parenting. Welcome back, guys. This week I decided to do something a little different that celebrates the arts, because I feel like, as much of a scientist that I am, the arts bring me a special joy. They restore my vigor for life. They inspire my heart to continue just pursuing, what I feel is my God-given purpose, which is medicine and health in children. So we're going to be chatting about how the arts inspire our hearts, of course, with a bit of a scientific pinch in there. And so get ready, dig in, get a pen out, get a paper out. I'm going to grab a quick cup of coffee and we'll get started. So I came across a completely random day that, well, in my opinion, completely random a day that's celebrated at the end of January. It's, I think it's January 31st, and it is Inspire Your Heart with Art Day. And I thought it was really nice, and it just kind of resonated with me because I had a pretty bad couple of shifts at work, and by bad I mean just, very draining, as sick babies. On my days off, the last couple days off, I feel like I feel so much more renewed and rested. And I realized that the things that I did this week or this weekend, this couple of days off, were all around the arts, and it brought me such joy. I ran while I was listening to this I think it was a really cool playlist. I didn't want to swear. That's why you saw me hesitate. But I thought it was a pretty cool playlist I listened to on Spotify as I ran outdoors while I'm training for my half marathon. That brought me such joy, just listening to the music and kind of just, I was having a dance party. And then I watched Netflix and chill. I watched a couple movies. And that also just, allowed me to just dream and live outside my reality for a bit. And then I played with my daughter, and we just played and painted and colored, and it was just such joy. So I thought, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how art inspires us. And while I was looking up articles, of course, the science behind the art, I came across a few. There's not a lot of standardized research about arts, obviously, but I came across a few articles, one in particular that I thought was well done, and that's the one I'll talk about because it resonates with me right now. So the article that I'm talking about is one that was published in 2014, but I thought it was a well done study, and that's why I'm talking about it. So what do? They took the question they were trying to answer was, do field trips to a museum or exposing children to a museum for a certain period of time affect them in certain ways? So they looked at about 10,000 students. It was about 140 something teachers, and it spanned about 123 schools. They took these students, put them in groups. They were similar in all characteristics in the matched groups that they were. So, for example, they would take a grade level in one school and a grade level in another school, the same grade level. Group A, for example, would go to the museum, spend an hour in the museum roaming around and look at five paintings, five set number paintings, and then Group B at that same grade level, same number of students, similar demographic characteristics, would go to the museum at a later date. Maybe 2-3 months down the line. And before Group B went to the museum, they then gave those two groups of students a questionnaire to answer, or a survey that they had questions on for them to answer. And then they figured out a few things from that, and that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing that they found was how well students recall the information that they received, because during the museum tour it wasn't structured. There wasn't a guided tour with someone actually talking to them. the discussions that we had during the museum were driven by the students. They were the ones asking the questions, and the teachers would answer and give them the names of certain things, like the name of a painting or the person who painted it, things like that. But again, it was student-led. So then 3 to 8 weeks after they'd gone to the museum, they sent out a survey and the students answered it. They didn't know that they were going to be answering this question before going to the museum. So that didn't bias them to like, I have to remember this. So then when they answered the questions, the first thing that they found that I thought was actually pretty cool was that they were able to recall what they learned at the museum. For example, Romare Burden's painting on, I think it depicted the Harlem Renaissance movement. I can't quite remember the name of the painting. Depicted the Harlem Renaissance movement. The students were able to recall the name of the painter, the painting, and as well as the fact that it depicted the Harlem Renaissance movement. So the historical fact, but as well as the sociological implication of it, they were able to remember. I didn't like history. I didn't like remembering dates. I found it hard. It was particularly challenging subject for me in school. So this is nice. I thought this was pretty cool. 70% of the students who saw the painting were able to remember these facts. So to me, I'm like, well, okay, I think that's a different way of learning. That's a different method we could apply to structured learning, or, historically what we thought was learning, sitting in the classroom and receiving didactic information. This is another way to teach students subjects that they may be struggling with through the arts. So that was the first bit. The second thing they looked at was the ability of students to critically think about art. And the results were astounding, in my opinion. So how did they do this? Again, they use the same match groups, right? Same grade level, but this time they use students, of course, between the grade in higher grade levels, so grade 3 to grade 12, and asked them to write an essay after they had seen a particular painting they hadn't seen before. And the question I asked them was, okay, so what do you think is going on in the painting? Why do you think so? Students wrote the essay, handed it in. They took off all identifying factors from those essays and then asked two independent researchers to grade these essays using a standardized 7-item rubric that is universally used for testing critical thinking. And some of the things on that item list are things like interpreting, observing, evaluating, comparing, flexible thinking, problem finding, things like that. And then they scored it depending on how many of these items they found in those essays. So those students who were exposed to the museum and exposed to the who had been exposed to the museum tour answered the question better. How did they and they answered the question better in the sense that the score they were given on their essays were higher. There was 9 times higher than those students who weren't exposed to the museum. The next thing they looked at was historical empathy. And this is pretty self-explanatory. How well do you empathize with someone who doesn't live in your current time or space? Someone who lives, who lives a different experience than you. And again, they asked students a certain question after being exposed to the museum tour. And on that standardized standardized questionnaire, they found that those students who had done the tour were 6% more likely to be empathetic than those who had not done the tour, because they could relate and had a better understanding of a different time, of a different experience of a different culture. And this hits close to home for me, of course, because I'm an immigrant, and my experience growing up was different from my current experience now, and it's different from my daughter's experience. So I have to do a good job of making her understand the different cultures that she has the privilege of coming from, and hopefully this also makes her more empathetic. So this is reassuring to me. One of the last things they looked at was tolerance, and I think this, like we talked about in our last video, this is a big one in this time that we live in, being tolerant, and beyond being tolerant, actually being understanding and being okay with a different person than you. But back to the article, they looked at how tolerant students were after again going to the museum and observing art. And they also found that there was a 7% increase in how likely students, intolerance of the students that went. So the question they asked in that time was, how much does it bother you if someone disagrees with your opinion? And those who had done the tour were 7% more likely to be tolerant, as opposed to those who hadn't done the tour. Now, what was striking throughout all of this was that talking about recalling information, critical thinking, tolerance, historical empathy, all of that, all those numbers, all that improvement that was seen with the students who went on the museum tour, there was an even bigger improvement in those students who went to the museum tour from a rural area. So they lived in a town that had less than 10,000 people. They were more likely to get these benefits. And again, those students that were from a poverty a school that was, deemed in that was located in an area that was deemed poor, those students were also more likely to get a greater benefit. So the arts inspire. I think that was the goal of this particular conversation, was to, although we know it, although we feel it, this was just the data behind the emotion that the arts do inspire, the arts do push us to greatness. So my tips for you this week, enjoy the arts. How I am going to be doing that is I will, when I'm reading a book with my daughter called She Persisted. Actually, my sister-in-law sent it to us, so I was really happy with that. She Persisted, and I think you guys have probably heard about that book. It just, there's a lot of historical facts in there, and I think that would serve as our museum trip, because it's going to be a busy week for me. So read a book with your children, and as you read it, talk about it, discuss it, have a discussion about it, as opposed to just plainly reading it to them just to get through it and get them into bed. 2, have a song and dance party. Bring out a tune that you both love. Talk about, who wrote it and why you like it so much. Just dance it out. And that's really it. That's all I'm doing. I'm keeping it simple this week, and I hope it inspires your hearts to have a great week. And thank you. I'll see you guys next week.